The grinder mentality that Randy and Brent Habert built into 44 Pro runs deep within our team. Every member shares a passion for the craft, the game, and most importantly, the player. When you step onto the field with a 44 Pro custom glove, you'll feel the difference. It's not just a glove, it's a 44 Pro. Crafted with dedication, made for performance, and built to last. Get your custom glove today at 44pro.com and experience the 44 Pro difference. That's 44pro.com, 44 Pro. Calling all Marvel fans, get Marvel Unlimited and unlock over 30,000 comics featuring your favorite heroes and iconic stories, all available to read anytime, anywhere. Plus, for a limited time, use promo code MUHoliday24 and save $50 off your subscription. Whether you're into classic tales or the latest adventures, there's something for everyone. Don't miss out. Head to marvel.com/unlimited today and start your Marvel journey now.
Trail Daddy, your about twice a month, every other week podcast covering the Portland Trail Blazers. I am Dave Deckard, managing editor of Blazers Edge. Before we start, make sure that if you're listening to this, you click on Blazers Edge and look just below all the pictures on the cover. You will find our annual invitation to help send kids to Blazers Edge Night. This year it's in March versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we would love to send over 1,000 kids to go see the Blazers who otherwise wouldn't be able to, either because they kind of can't afford it or they can't find chaperones or transportation or what have you. All of that comes together on Blazers Edge Night, and it's easy for them to get there. When we provide the tickets for everyone, that's where you come in. You buy tickets from the Blazers just as if you were buying them yourself, and instead of going to you, they go to the kids who are in need. So we hope that you're able to do that. Again, blazersedge.com. Right below the cover, you will see that post. Now, when we're talking about the Blazers, oh gosh, it's another dip in the season, isn't it? A couple weeks ago, they beat Milwaukee. That was a high point, and they beat New Orleans, too. Although beating New Orleans is kind of like saying you're breathing air or drinking water. Everybody does it. But in the midst of those two nice little wins, you had a close loss to the Pistons, a loss to the Mavericks, big loss to the Heat, loss to the Nets that was significant, and getting smashed by the Clippers. There's a lot of losing going on once again, and that is creating unrest in Trailblazers land. Now, we're not going to delve that deeply into it, because if you're mad at the Blazers for losing this year, it's like being mad at a toddler for, I don't know, bumping into things, or a teenager for talking back to you. They're going to do it. It's in the natural order of things. You can't get too upset. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean you accept it, but you understand it. Yeah? And you try not to overreact. I think, though, that there are probably three things that we need to pay attention to if we want to ask why the Blazers are losing lately. And those three things, I think, have to do with a common, I don't know what I want to say, lack of attention to detail, lack of effort. There's a little bit of something, it's just kind of starting to fall apart, as it does. And you know, this has happened a couple times before, but then the Blazers have come up with wins and bounced back. You just wonder if it's going to happen at some point this season and they just give up the ghost. That it's just not going to get better. I don't know if that is true now or if they have another resurrection in them as we head toward the All-Star break. But we'll have to see. Right now, here's what I do know. There are three areas in which the Blazers are kind of falling apart. The first is one that's plagued them all season, which is turnovers. Now, this is also to be expected. It's a young team. They don't have a real true point guard. The point guard that they do have, who's most point guardy, Scoot Henderson, we'll talk about him in a minute, is prone to turnovers. Anthony Simons also makes quite a few. Denny Odvia has been making quite a few. Everybody who handles the ball and tries to pass it for them ends up turning the ball over. But that's been a real killer simply because the Blazers offense, cannot take the lack of possessions. I mean, they're already not a great offense. They don't produce a lot of points. Every possession you take away cuts into those points produced. If they're committing 18, 20 turnovers a game, that is 20 possessions or 20 shots that they didn't get. And even at their relatively low point production, that's probably somewhere between 8 and 10 points that they just give up right there. Now, obviously, you can't have a perfect game, but you don't want to have that many turnovers. They cannot afford to give up the points. The other thing is the Blazers' offense works pretty well when they play fast. They like to get out in transition. That's when they look good because they're young and athletic, and those are easier shots. But the problem with turnovers is now you're putting the other team out into transition, which A, takes away your own transition opportunities because it's hard to run when the other team just dunked on you. And B, it takes away the edge that you get from those easy transition buckets that you got. No good scoring 16 points a game on the break if you're giving up 18 or really even 14. You want to be the one who wins that battle decisively if you're the Blazers, and because of turnovers, they're just not doing it. Another thing that's plaguing them is rebounding. Now, they are still a really good offensive rebounding team. They are 5th in the league in offensive rebounding percentage at about 28%. That's pretty good. They've got some good offensive rebounders, and this also helps the offense. If you take that away, then they're going to really stink. So thank God for their offensive rebounding prowess. However, they are also 29th in the league in offensive rebound percentage allowed, giving up, guess what, just right about 28%. The same offensive rebounding percentage that they get, which means for all the goodness that comes from that offensive rebounding, for all the advantage that it's supposed to give them, they actually end up with comparatively little edge. They don't get to reap the benefits of their advantage because they give it all right back on the other end. And I think we're seeing this. Right? DeAndre Ayton a little bit. I think he slipped a little bit. Donovan Clingan has trouble holding on to defensive rebounds sometimes. So even your super strong rebounders are having problems with this, let alone the rest of the team. Now, some nights they look really great. Some nights you look at the box score and you go, gosh, there are 3 Blazers in double-digit rebounds, and only one of them's a center, and it looks good. But the problem is that's not every night. And on average, they're generating almost no advantage from one of their strongest natural abilities, which in itself kind of tells the story of the season. It's like, okay, can you point to good things about the Blazers? You absolutely can. Are those good things making a difference? They are absolutely not. And this is where, I don't know, better positioning, better hands. I know you can't really wish for that, but a more determined effort on that defensive glass would be huge. Now, some of it, too, is because opposing offenses are spreading out the Blazers. Portland's pretty good at covering the arc. Not as good as they were last year, I think, but they're still decent. But that commitment to covering the arc may be sacrificing a little bit of defensive rebounding if the centers can't handle it. But still, I think the centers should be handling it a little better, and they probably need some help. A little more than they're getting, and it's just not working. And this is really frustrating for me to see because this is basics. Like this is something that should come standard. Like, look, I was looking around at cars the other day just for fun, and you could tell the difference. Like there's some cars that like have super duper, I mean, it has 300 horsepower and a 10 gear automatic, transmission and all that stuff. And they're actually listing stuff. And then I literally was reading one description of a used car, and it had like oh, it has 4 disc brakes. And it's like, well, that's cool. It has brakes on every wheel. That's good. Do the windows roll down too? I hope so. I hope all of them work. Does it have 2 headlights and not just 1? This is defensive rebounding. Everybody's supposed to be able to do it. And if the Blazers aren't, that's a little bit of, I think, just, that's a serious way to fall apart. It's an effort issue. The other one, I think, is defensively overall. And it's hard to point to a smoking gun here because I think there are several. First of all, I think we need to admit that the Blazers have a pretty optimal defensive lineup. And that looks something like Donovan Clingan's playing center, and Toumani Camara and Deni Avdija are in the middle somewhere. And then you've got, I don't know, you can have Shaedon Sharpe in there if you want. But, you have guards, your more defensively apt guards are playing. Unfortunately, that's not their regular lineup. That's not their starting lineup. I think Jeremy Grant helps with that, too. I mean, the ultimate would be, I suppose, Clingan, Grant, Camara, Avdija, and a point guard who isn't terrible. That defensive lineup actually looks pretty good. And the Blazers, you can tell a tangible difference when they don't have holes in their lineup. But that defensive lineup isn't the lineup they're playing. And part of that is because there have been injuries. Grant's been out. Avdija's been out. Clingan's been up and down. And also partially because that lineup has a hard time generating offense, and all the defense in the world isn't any good if you still lose by 15 because you can't score. But I think it's also fair to admit that if you take away that defensive lineup, the Blazers have serious holes. And those holes show up. And again, I'm not really interested in tagging individual players because it's not all their fault. But I think it's fair to say that when DeAndre Ayton has been in the lineup the last couple weeks, the defense hasn't looked as good. When Anthony Simons is in the lineup, the defense doesn't look as good. Even Delano Banton, I mean, he had a lot of steals early in the season. He's still got some of those, but he's not like airtight there. And I hope to see more from him defensively. Maybe he needs some more minutes and reps to make that happen. It's certainly possible. But look, you've got to admit that when the Blazers play anything but their optimal defensive lineup, they really have to hustle. They really have to concentrate. They have to communicate and coordinate. And those things are not happening. You look at them out there on the floor against the Brooklyn Nets, or God forbid, against the Los Angeles Clippers. And they're not getting back on defense. I mean, the Clippers housed them. I mean, Hall of Fame eventuality aside, when James Harden is beating you down on the break, James Harden, I mean, his beard creates enough wind resistance that he shouldn't be able to outrun anybody. And when he's dunking on you on the break, something is wrong, let alone everybody else. And the Clippers were just having a free-for-all running on the Blazers because Portland wasn't getting back. The Nets, they had a little bit of that drop problem. It's been pretty consistently the last 2 or 3 weeks. Their transition defense has not looked good. And again, this is another thing that should come standard. First of all, it's usually up to the point guard, but if they can't make it, there's got to be a small forward or a shooting guard out guarding the three-point arc who can hustle back as soon as that shot goes up. You cannot spend your entire offensive possession watching or waiting for the ball and or going for offensive rebounds if you're not in the play. You've got to get back as soon as that shot goes up. And you know what? The Blazers just aren't doing it. And that transition defense has been lousy. Their screen defense has been kind of porous. They've been closing out here and there. I still like their length getting out to the arc, but they don't always do it. I think that part they do more consistently, but it almost doesn't matter when basically, opposing teams are screening, getting easy switches, and then headhunting. And you can tell who they're headhunting. They headhunt if they've got a good big man scorer or a decent guard who can handle the ball. They're headhunting DeAndre Ayton out there. Or they're going to get a big man on Anthony Simons or Scoot Henderson. And those are the three people they've really been going after. And when they go after those people, they tend to score. Now, again, you don't expect Ayton and Simons and Henderson to bear up the brunt of one-on-one defense all the time, especially in switching situations. Look, I'm not calling out DeAndre Ayton for getting matched up with an opposing wing who's 6'6" or 6'7" out at the three-point arc, because you know what? That player is going to burn him. Ayton isn't agile enough and isn't a shot blocker enough. He's good. Ayton actually has some defensive chops when he can lay back and help. When he's coming across the lane helping, he's actually not too bad. But out on an island against a real offensive player, Ayton is going to get taken. And the Blazers aren't compensating for that, and they're switching into that too easily. It's the same thing, obviously, with the guards on the other side. There's an automatic switch, and then the point guard gets against a 6'8" or 6'10" player, gets back down into the lane fairly quickly, and they're done. And you know what? When the Blazers send help, sometimes or often, I'll give them this, often that initial help is there. The first person is making the read correctly, and if the Blazers get burned once or twice on switches, they usually cut it off. But that second rotation just isn't there, and that's where the opposing three-pointers come unopposed, and that's where the Blazers get in trouble. And you know what? Long story short, it looks like right now the Blazers are good for about 10 to 14 seconds of defense when the possession clock runs for 24. And that's just not good enough. They're not communicating. They're not helping each other. They're not hustling. So when you have anyone but their premium individual defenders out on the floor, they are getting hosed. And that also, I mean, this is more understandable than the other two. This is more advanced. This is not standard. This is somewhat of an option, and how they play that option will determine how good they are. But you know what? It doesn't seem like they have a lot of good options, nor are they following through with them. Now, we can say, is this a coaching issue? Yeah, I mean, part of it is. They don't look prepared. But I think part of it is also an execution issue. You will have several games where the Blazers will look pretty good for a quarter, and then that same lineup will come out for another shift and then look bad. And that's a little bit opposing adjustments, but that's also because, you know what? They're just not keeping it up for 48 minutes. Oh my gosh, how quickly these games have devolved into somebody from the Blazers comes down, finds an open shot, takes it, and that's the whole point. What kind of shot are you going to get? Who gets the shot? And then everything kind of is just waiting until you get the next turn to shoot. It's kind of like playground ball. You know, it's like watching high school on the playground where you're going, yeah, okay, let the other team run their stuff. We'll try to get the ball back so maybe I can shoot again. And oh boy, that's not going to fly or come even close to it in the NBA. It's a sign that your team is showing cracks, and the Blazers are multiple cracks. They're a cut glass vase that's been dropped off the fourth story at this point. And it's funny because you watch them give you hope for about a quarter, and then for the other three quarters, they're just shattered. And okay, this is not entirely a coaching issue. Players have got to take some pride, and players have got to show some consistency that they're just not showing. And I don't expect miracles, but I don't expect you to stand around and watch plays happen either. I don't expect you to hustle to the offensive end, try to get open, get your shot, and then watch your effort go down by 33% for the entire, rest of the opponent's possession until you get the ball again. That's crap. And the Blazers have been kind of playing like crap. And look, there's no way around it. Until that changes, they're not even going to look good. Forget winning. they're not even going to look good out there. And they looked really bad against the Clippers. They didn't look good against the Nets. It was just, it's just not happening for them right now. Again, let's see if they can pull it together for another upcycle. All it takes is a win or two. That's the nice thing. This team isn't used to winning. 2 wins in a row looks like an entire 3-week streak to them. So things will get cheerier if they win a couple games. But they better get that first one semi-accidentally at this point and then really try hard for the second one, I guess, because they're not even close right now. And it doesn't seem to matter the opponent anymore. That's the change from the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, they looked like they were close against bad opponents and got blown out by some good ones. And you could tell that the effort was there either way. They were just overmatched. Now the effort's not there either way, and it's kind of random. If the opponent has a bad night, the Blazers have a chance. But if not, they don't, no matter who the opponent is. That's definitely a step down. And if the escalator keeps going down, what you're going to see very soon is that they won't have a chance to win against anybody, that everybody's just kind of given up, and any wins do become completely accidental. That's where they were at the end of last season. I hope, for their sake, that they don't fall there again. I think they're too good of a lineup and too good of a roster to fall that far, especially if it happens around or before the All-Star break. I'll be very disappointed. But have no doubt about it, this is one of the eventual outcomes that is possible, maybe even probable, if they don't turn it around. Now, we should say one other thing, that the people sitting out games do matter. That Jeremy Grant is not playing matters a lot. And I know people were saying trade him or he's holding back the young guys. I think you can see that he's not. And it's not that, I'm anxious for a ton of Jeremy Grant possessions, but I am saying he knows where to be on defense. And just as importantly, he knows where to be on offense, even when he doesn't have the ball. So it's a little easier to make plays. It's a little easier to find him. You commit a few less turnovers, probably. You get a few more good shots, probably, and you look better with Jeremy Grant in the lineup than you do without him because of his experience and his ability to score. And the Blazers miss him when Denny Advia doesn't play. Now, he's not perfect, but at least he provides some energy and another defensive body out there that they sorely need, that they cannot do without. That's a big deal. Donovan Clingan only provides, 15 minutes a game, but those 15 minutes tend to be important, and if you put the right people around him, it provides a defensive boost. And the Blazers need every little bit they can get. They cannot go... Look, if they were a sports car that can go 150 miles an hour without trying, they can go half throttle. But they're kind of the Hyundai. They're the Yugo. If you floor it, it'll do 80. That's fine as long as they floor it. But if you take away a Jeremy Grant, even if you take away a Donovan Clingan, let alone a Denny Avdia, then all of a sudden your throttle's at 80%. You're not going 80 miles an hour anymore. You're going 60, and you can't win doing 60. The Blazers literally need everything all the time. And when injuries aren't allowing that, then they're not succeeding. So we should put that asterisk there. I mean, sometimes you do need to blame the obvious reason and not just the coaching and not just the effort. That goes along with it. It's a lot easier to give a lot more effort when you feel like it's not going to waste, and having a full roster certainly helps with that. Now, one more thing. This week we'd be remiss if we did not mention Mr. Scoot Henderson, who had the week of his life, really. I mean, he scored 16 against the Clippers, which was pretty good, but he had 39 points against the Brooklyn Nets. Holy cannoli, that is not bad at all. 13 for 18 from the floor, 8 of 10 from three-point range, 5 of 8 from the foul line, 39 points, 6 assists, 2 steals, 4 rebounds. We'll even ignore his 4 turnovers if he gives you 39 points. So there have been some questions coming into the mailbag. I haven't addressed them. I don't know if I'll do it in writing on site or not, because it's kind of I'm not sure it's the best question, but it's there anyway from a few people. Is Scoot getting better? Has Scoot turned the corner? What does this mean for Scoot? And I will tell you a couple things. First of all, okay, let's give credit. that game was good to see against the Nets. Yay, Scoot. I mean, don't take away his almost 40-point game. Applaud him. Standing ovation. Good job. Loved it. Just give him all the flowers. Look, your chances to praise Scoot unabashedly have been few and far between. Take them while you have them. This is part of the problem I find with the new analytical wave of fandom that has come about in the last 2 decades, which I am very much a part of. I exist because of this. I will admit it. I'm not trying to bite the hand that feeds me. But here's something that people do. They make it about their own analysis and their own opinion instead of about the game and the people who play it. In other words, I form an opinion about a player, and then I stick to that opinion no matter what because I formed it. And anything the player does that corresponds to that opinion, I say is indicative, and I absolutely highlight. And anything that the player does that goes against my opinion, then I will not highlight, and I will say is an aberration. Okay? And the problem is, then it becomes self-confirming bias. You're not even analytical anymore. You're just spouting your opinion. Another problem is that you really don't get to enjoy the game, and you really don't get to deal with the players as they are. And what that ends up is a lot of people will see a game from Scoot Henderson of 39 points and go, meh, I mean, who cares? Okay, no, stop. Just because you form the opinion that he's not that great, which may be accurate, just because you form the opinion that he's a disappointment as the 3rd overall pick in the 2023 NBA draft, which may be accurate, doesn't mean you can't also stop and say, that was a hell of an outing. And congratulations, Scoot. And it was great to see that. And it was great to see the promise. It was great to see the shots fall. It was great to see the aggressiveness. It was what we've always wanted. And even if it's just for a night, let's credit that night as real. And let's absolutely take a moment to say, yay. And I want to do that, okay? Great game, love it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can take it the other way and say, well, my analytical point of view is that Scoot Henderson has turned the corner, and therefore, from now on, everything's going to be shiny, and look, I'm going to find all the evidence that says that's so, and ignore the rest. Actually, that's probably not true. It's probably not indicative. And probably what happened, long story short, Scoot Henderson got hot from the three-point arc. He shot 8 for 10, scored 24 points from the three-point arc, and it was amazing to see. And here's what you can take as a learning thing from this game, is that if and when Scoot ever does develop a three-point shot, now, he doesn't have to shoot 8 of 10, even if he shot 4 of 10 every night, he would get dangerous. And notice how much easier the rest of Scoot's scoring became in that game when he actually hit those shots. It was phenomenal. He looked like a superstar. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar with a three-point shot, but it sure wouldn't hurt, would it? And if he was reliable from the arc, he would give the Blazers a whole new weapon, a whole new wrinkle in their offense that would be hard to ignore and would make them better. From our lips to God's ears, let's hope this happens on a consistent basis. But until it happens on a consistent basis, it's impossible to say anything about this other than Scoot got really hot that night, and it was great to see. And here's the thing about a player in Scoot's situation. When you're trying to develop, and especially when you've fallen below expectations, and, this is not, look, Travis Outlaw, we dealt with this for years. Martell Webster, we waited to come around. Jarrett Jack is an example of a success story, but it took him a little while to get there too. Look, we've dealt with this before. Sebastian Telfair, he didn't make it. He went the other way. Jared Bayless, I don't know. Now all kinds of people are coming to mind now. We've seen this before. But when you're in this situation, as Scoot is, trying to make good on early promise or supposed hype or reputation or whatever it is, here's the thing. You want to see the ceiling at some point, which we did. Great, we've seen it. But I think we've seen a little bit of Scoot's ceiling before. I think that was actually pre-established before he came into the league with his athleticism, his ability to get to the rim, yada, yada, you know all the stuff. I think people were thinking Scoot's ceiling was pretty darn high. We don't need to see more ceiling. It's not about the ceiling anymore. It's literally about what you do consistently to raise the floor. As right now, what Scoot is like is Scoot is church, where you go into the church and there's a domed ceiling with glittery gold inlay and at least a half-completed pretty picture on the top that looks like it could be pretty great. But there's literally no floorboards. It just goes down to the basement. And there may be some stairs and some rebar down there, but you have no place to put the pews. You have no place to even walk in once you walk in the door. You're going to fall all the way to the bottom. And you're not going to be able to make use of the ceiling to admire it or to worship it or to do whatever the heck you do. You're not going to get even close to it until you get those floorboards in. And those floorboards are what he does every single night. The nightly production needs to get better and more consistent. And when those floorboards are in at least a base level, then we can start reaching our finger up to the sky to touch the hand of God and say, hey, this ceiling is looking like it could be a masterpiece. But until then, it's just kind of a pretty dream up there that no one's going to be seeing because you cannot actually use the building. That's exactly where Scoot is right now, and he needs to keep working. And, you know, we've seen promise with him. Anyone who says he's a total bust, I mean, if you look at his, let's say this, if you look at his overall statistics, there are areas of concern, perhaps severe areas of concern, because A, they are not that great overall, and B, there's not been that much improvement. He's shooting slightly higher because he's had a good month, basically. He's shooting 42% this season as opposed to 38.5% from the floor last season. 42% is not bad. But his three-point percentage is still at 34% instead of 32.5%. That's some improvement, but not radical. You love his two-point percentage. That's getting better. That's obviously an area of growth. But his turnovers, I mean, they've gone down, but they still exist. And they've only gone down about half a turnover per 36 minutes, which is not quite enough. I mean, overall, in aggregate, he's committing only 2.8 turnovers instead of 3.4. That's improvement, but he's also playing slightly fewer minutes. He's also scoring less, so there's bad things to balance his good things. Overall, you haven't seen him take a leap like you wanted to. He's still kind of taxiing to the runway and maybe doing the checklist and seeing and making sure the throttles work, but they're certainly not engaged, and he's not motoring down the runway yet. You want to see him do both. That's a concern. And therefore, there is some justification for saying, hey, this guy might be a little bit of a bust compared to what we expect, and he's not improving. Okay, I get it. But if you haven't seen any improvement in Scoot at all, if you haven't been, you got to pay attention. First of all, I mean, I think his passing has improved. Look, last year, I couldn't count the number of I can't believe he just tried that passes he was making. Also, turnovers off the dribble on the regular, dribbling into traffic. It was like rookie season times 12, okay? This year, he's getting a lot freer. He's making more decisive moves. He's making more compact moves. And I think his passing has gotten better. In fact, I kind of like his alley-oop passing to rolling Portland centers. That's a wrinkle in his game that he's developed that's actually pretty good. And I will say right now that even though he's not the most accurate guy in the world, period, he's better at those alley-oop passes than Damian Lillard ever was. So there's something, I guess. Also, I like, I don't know how to say it. I like his defense in that I think he's standing in there more. I'm not sure he's that much more effective, but you can see that he's concentrating on this. You can see that it matters to him. He is at least trying. And that is more than at least a couple Blazers do on a nightly basis. So I'm okay with that for right now. I can see improvement in Scoot. And given that, I'm willing to say that since they've already spent the pick on him, they should continue to ride that. Now, I'm okay if they decide they want to trade him. I don't know who you'd trade him for, whether he'd probably be part of a package, right? In a bigger deal that got you something more. I can't see you trading him like straight up and getting a lot for him. But he could be a tantalizing throw-in. And if the Blazers want to do that to get a good deal done, I'm not going to scream about that. I'm fine with it because they don't have to ride with him. They don't have to wait if they think there's a better path. But if there's not a better path and they choose to ride with him, I'm okay with that, honestly. That I think he's made enough steps this season to go, all right, he merits at least not giving up on, even if you're not totally hoping that he's going to be a superstar at this point. And let's see if we can't get some of that floor laid. Let's see what happens when there's a new coach next year, potentially. And let's see what happens when he's got yet another year under his belt. And now he comes in on his third year. He's not trying to make up for last year. There's not a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He's simply going in, and it's pretty routine that he is playing. And between a new system and his own personal individual routine of having been in the league 3 years now, let's see if that doesn't make a difference. That's the story on Scoot for now. I can't give you a lot of hope, I suppose, but you also should not have a lot of despair. He is simply a player who is trying to make it, and let's see if he can. That's going to do it for this time. I assume when we're back in another week or two that we will have something else to talk about. I know that the All-Star break is not going to be fantastic for the Blazers this year, but as we get ever closer, we can always hope. I mean, is Shaedon Sharpe in the dunk contest? Or are there other players who can, be in the skills competition or something like that? Rising stars, perhaps. But also, are there things that develop along that All-Star break? And that's going to be an interesting question. Of course, you have the February trade deadline coming up. The Blazers have been kind of even on that. We know who's kind of been rumored to be traded. We know there's not a lot of urgency. And frankly, it looks like the price for trades is falling. In other words, the return for players is not going to be great this mid-season, if rumors are any indication. So the Blazers may stand pat and hope to get a better haul later when the market changes. But probably next time we get together, we'll talk about that because we will be right on that deadline. But anyway, we are glad that you are here. Again, don't forget to buy tickets for Blazers Edge Nights to send kids in need to see the Blazers play. And we will be with you in recaps, in mailbags, in analysis, and all kinds of other stuff as we go along. And we are glad that you are at Blazers Edge with us. Until next time, we will see you at the court. And as always, go Blazers.